In this part of the video, we're going to discuss the engine block, the Vsible V8 block. So it's very important. One of the things I'd like to point out, this is a stock block, and the stock block does work okay. It does what it's supposed to do, I guess, what it was designed to do. And this block will run okay. If you want to run it up to about 1500 RPM, it will run and hold together. But anything above about 1500, 2000 RPM, this stock block won't work very well. You'll start having all kinds of problems with it. So in order to correct those problems and to run a higher speed, one of the things I'd like to point out is that, well, one of the things I'd like to point out is this, by the way, this is a blackout block from 1977, and here's what I mean by blackout block. This is a blackout block. I have two of these kits. These are very rare kits. And this is what it's supposed to look like, but this is what your blackout block looks like. It's considerably darker. It's a factory defect from 1977. So if you happen to run onto one of these that looks like this, hang on to it, because they're kind of rare and they're pretty hard to find nowadays. And just thought I'd point that out. But let's look at this bottom end here. This bottom end, this is your frame, stock frame right here, and it's pretty fragile. Even after you glue the block together, it's pretty fragile, and it will break very easy. This is one of the reasons you can't turn very high speeds with the Vsible V8, is because these will this section right here will just pull right out, and when it pulls out, you'll explode your engine. So you don't want to do that. So these just the caps, of course, just screw in to here, and that's what holds your crankshaft in. Well, these will pull right out, and when they do, you're going to have a problem if you're going any kind of speed at all. So these are pretty well limited, about 1500 RPM. If you want to run up your Vsible V8, you'll probably be okay, but I wouldn't go any much over 1500, 2000 RPM. You could have a real severe problem. So to overcome all that, this is the modified block you see in the video. This is a very strong block, very strong, as opposed to the stock block, which is pretty weak. And one of the reasons is this webbing section in here has been filled in with epoxy. So, and then there's studs. There's 10 studs that goes down into the epoxy. There's even some aluminum screen right here to strengthen it up a little bit. So you got 10 studs that go right down into all the way down into the web. So this makes it a very strong bottom end that I've had absolutely no problem with. And you see in the video that it has turned over 7,000 RPM, and this is one of the reasons this has done this. Also, this has been sawed off here. I'll show you later how it fits on this piece. This piece here and the stock part here on the rear frame part has been sawed off to make it so I can, it's a lot easier to assemble the crank and all the parts that way. One of the things I'd like to point out is that the the heads are held on by 5 studs here, and these are 5 studs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And also here is this tubing right here is your return, oil return for the cylinder heads, for the lubricating oil, and the cylinder heads for the rocker arms. This is where the oil return goes back down to the pan. So when the heads are clamped on, there's a head gasket here, of course, but then it fits on here. We'll go through this all in the assembly when we assemble it. I'll show you all this. But when the heads clamp on, when they bolt down, it has a tendency to clamp the whole engine together, because these studs here go all the way down to the bottom, down in here into the epoxy down here in the webbing. So they go all the way down here into the webbing. So this makes a very strong block. So the heads are held on down here from the bottom. So the heads can be tightened down fairly tight, and pulls the whole engine together. One of the things I'd like to point out is that these front and rear plates here are bolted on, so they can be taken apart for maintenance. And so there's nuts here and screws that can be taken apart. Stock, these are glued on, they're glued up here on top, which doesn't work very well. Same on the rear. You got a nut here, here, and a screw here and here, so these can be taken apart. One of the things too, this is the lubrication rail right here. This is your lubrication rail, and your oil, your lubricant goes in this hole, in this orifice, this hole, and this hole. And so that's what this is silicone tube, and the silicone tube from this lubrication rail goes to different parts of the engine to lubricate the engine. It's all pressure fed. So that's what all this is here. And of course you got 3 down here, if you can see it. I got 3 camshaft bearings that supports the camshaft in here. We looked at that in the last video, so I won't go through that. And you have here you have these are lifter guides here for the lifters. In the last video I showed how the lifters fit in here. Well, this is lifter guides here that have been installed. So this is not the stock lifter guides. That's pretty much it for that. So let's go back to the bottom here, and let's talk about the bottom. One of the things here, the lubrication lines come down through the webbing, and they come out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all 5 main bearings are pressure fed, and this is very critical to the operation of this engine, is to have all the main bearings pressure fed, just like in a regular engine. And one of the things here, the three center saddles have the 3 center bearings. Saddles have Teflon. This is Teflon lining here. The 2 on the end they're not Teflon lined, and there's a reason for that, and I'll go into that later when we work on the crankshaft. But and then everything else just bolts on. The oil filter, which doesn't do anything. It's a non-functioning oil filter. It just bolts on here, just screws on like that. And of course your oil pump. Your oil pump goes in here like this, you know. They're both non-functioning, but it looks nice, you know. So that pretty much covers the bottom end of this thing. And all the caps, of course, they go on. They're all numbered, and the caps, of course, go on like this. And we'll go through that when we assemble it. And so when we assemble it, we'll go through that part. So that pretty much does it here. The epoxy really helps solidify it. This is a very strong block. It doesn't want to twist at all. It doesn't twist or distort at all. So next we'll cover the crankshaft.